some of the best memories are in the car on the way home with your parents after these games, and not everybody gets that. And so I always encourage your first statement to your kids is, I really enjoyed watching you play today. I want an open line of communication between my athletes, and I want them to have ownership in what they do. I ask for input from them on a lot of things. One thing that any one of the kids that play for me, one thing that they will know is that I care about them.
Yeah.
And that's something that they can walk away from our program knowing that there's somebody who's always in their corner.
Oh, do we have a good one for you today? It's episode 11, and we are going to talk some softball today. We are bringing in a special guest from right here where we record from in Athens, Ohio, on the campus of Ohio University. We have Kenzie Roark, the head softball coach for the Ohio University Bobcats. And we can't wait to get into this episode. And so episode 11 begins right now. Well, we have with us today a very special guest, and I'm especially excited to sit down in front of the microphones with her because we are going to talk some softball today. Pat and I often refer to softball in this podcast because we are assuming that there are a lot of similarities in the topics that we discussed or that we have discussed so far. But we no longer have to assume, because today we have Kenzie Roark on the podcast, and Coach Roark is about to begin her second season as the head softball coach for the Ohio University Bobcats. In her first season, she put up a really impressive record of 34-21, 12-8 in the Mid-American Conference, and entered the MAC postseason tournament as the 3 seed, and then went on to win their first 3 games, putting them in the winner's bracket for the championship game. But then Toledo, sorry to bring this up.
Yeah.
Toledo was able to win 2 in a row to end the Cat season. But nevertheless, it was a phenomenal first season, especially considering when you came on board. Coach Roark has been a Division I college athlete herself, playing 4 years at Virginia Tech, where she became one of the all-time great pitchers in Virginia Tech history. She was the ace of the Hokies pitching staff for 3 over 4 years while she was there, and was an Atlantic Coast Conference All-Tournament and Player of the Week selection during her career there. She began her coaching career as a student assistant at Virginia Tech, and then went on to be the pitching coach at East Tennessee State, and then invested 4 really great years at the University of South Carolina Upstate, which is, by the way, a powerhouse in fast pitch softball in the Atlantic Sun Conference, as the pitching coach there, which, by the way, the Spartans had 3 40-win seasons during her time with that team. So Ohio University, I guess needless to say, was really fortunate to hire Coach Roark as the head coach in August of last year. If I remember right, this is like coming up on your 1-year anniversary, isn't it?
September 1st.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. It's our great pleasure today, and I'm here with my co-host, Pat Martin.
Hey, everyone.
Sorry, every time we introduce a guest, you never get a chance to say much.
I'm good with it.
So, Coach Roark, we welcome you. It's Kenzie Roark to the Coaching Life podcast. We're really excited to be able to talk some softball today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you, Coach. Coach, if you don't mind, could you walk us through your journey from high school to becoming a Division I college athlete for Virginia Tech, to becoming a student assistant there, to then becoming a pitching coach at 2 different universities, to now being the head softball coach for Ohio University?
First of all, high school, I was lucky to play on a good travel team, and I had a really good high school softball team as well. My coach in high school was pivotal in making me mentally tough, and she was a big reason as to kind of why I got to go where I went. I was recruited by Virginia Tech actually in Seattle, Washington. That was a tournament that they saw me in. It was the ASA Nationals, and that it was funny. We went across the country to get recruited by a university that was only 5 hours away from me. So went there. Scott Thomas was my head coach. I had originally gone into college with the idea that I wanted to do broadcasting, and I made it through my first couple of communications classes and was like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, just maybe not what's for me. And I, at that point, had done some clinics and camps with my pitching coach and with our team. And I talked to Scott and was like, listen, I kind of think that I really like this. And it's something that I can see myself doing. Like, how do I get involved, and how do I kind of get my foot in the door? And he was like, if that's something that you're serious about, you can take a 5th year, and you can stick around and you can be a student assistant, and you can kind of get that experience under your belt, because any job that you apply for coaching wise, every single one of them say experience is required.
Yeah.
Well, how do you get that?
How do you get it?
Right.
So
by volunteering.
Exactly. So I was extremely lucky that he let me do that, and so I took that 5th year. It was very different being in that role, obviously being with 3 of those classes I had obviously played with, but they were really great as far as allowing me to kind of transition into a role that went from teammate to, I wasn't coaching them,
Sure.
You know what I mean? But it was a really great experience. And then after that, had to fly away from Virginia Tech, which was really sad because I loved college. But I went to East Tennessee State, which was about 2.5 hours away from where my parents are from. And I just kind of, again, one of those things, it's a lot of the times it's who you know. And Brad Irwin, who is the head coach there still, he actually was out to dinner with some friends of mine, and they knew that I had applied for that job, and they were like, you need to hire her. Well, she doesn't have experience. I'm telling you need to hire her. And he was the reason I really got my foot in the door. As an assistant, I owe a lot to him as far as that goes. He gave me a lot of freedom that first couple of years. Let me jump in feet first. I did a lot of learning by doing the wrong thing sometimes, you know what I mean?
Familiar
Sometimes
with
you
that
gotta
one,
learn.
yeah.
You gotta learn that way.
Spend 90% of our time talking on this podcast about
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
doing the wrong things.
Oh yeah. And from there, East Tennessee State was in the ASUN at that time, and from there, I went to USC Upstate and had a phenomenal experience there. Chris Hawkins, the head coach, he's been there for almost 30 years now, and he was an incredible mentor. Any moment that he could say, hey, come here, when you're a head coach, this is something that you want to do, and this is something that I look for, and it was an invaluable experience. From the minute that I got there, it was learning, and I was still learning the day that I left. And so it was really, really an incredible experience for me, especially as a young coach. And the assistant coach, Brian Pack, he's one of my best friends in the world, and same thing. He just full of knowledge, and both of them want to grow the game. They want to tell everybody everything they know. And so, yeah, just very lucky to have been able to work with them for so long.
That's
Cool.
great. Coach, you said something. Actually, you said a couple of things there that struck my mind, but you said the word learning. And you're talking about a time when you were the pitching coach, but you were still learning. Our episode 4 just aired Monday, and in that episode we talked about how important it was in order to be better as a coach, you have to collaborate, and you have to be trained, and you have to learn. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes we don't do as coaches, because we feel like that we should already know all the answers and we should already be where we need to be. So we're almost turned off by the idea of getting ideas and learning from someone else. But great point there that, no matter where you are in life, no matter where you are in your career, you should always be learning.
There's a reason why the great coaches in college are great. I mean, you go to the American Baseball Coaches Association conference. Which you go to that convention, don't you?
Yeah, I'm gonna. I'll be there this year for sure. Yeah.
You hear it every year. Tim Corbin, coach of Vanderbilt University, sits in the front row with a notebook, filling it up on every speaker, whether that speaker is a professional speaker, a high school speaker, or one of his peers in the university world. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason why you're just constantly learning. That's so valuable. so valuable. How'd you hear about the OU job?
So actually, they reached out to me. I mean, it was
awesome.
It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
You know, we were already in practice at Upstate because they started school a couple weeks before OU did. And I got a call from the senior women's administrator, and she asked if I was interested in the job. And I said, absolutely. Obviously, we had actually played OU a couple of years before that. They came down to Spartanburg, and so I knew the program, and I knew that they had some successful seasons. And she called me on, I think it was a Friday, asked me if I was interested. I said yes. She called me Monday, or maybe it was a Tuesday, asked me if I could be on a plane the next day. I said, sure. Got on a plane on that Wednesday, had dinner with them Wednesday night, went on the rest of my interview Thursday, made it back to Spartanburg at 11 o'clock at night on Thursday, and they offered me the job at noon on Friday. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it was a very fast, very whirlwind.
They had done their homework, obviously. It was just a formality getting you up here, most likely.
I don't know what their process was, but I'm really thankful. I had, I think I had some good people in my corner, making calls for me. And so that always helps,
Yeah. So you come up here, you come to Ohio, and little Athens, Ohio, and you are here in August. The students are beginning class that week, I'm assuming. I think it was around August 26th last year or so when they were...
My first day was September 1st, and that was the first day of class.
Yeah. So there you go. The recruits for this past year were already here. Mm-hmm. You didn't have any hand in that, right? Mm-hmm. And what was that like? We're getting them on board. I mean, I know you and I've had some conversations. I know some things that you did behind the scenes. I mean, if you don't care to talk about how you had to massage that a little bit coming in as the new person, I'm sure that some of the existing, some of the players that have been there for 4 years were pretty attached to the previous staff, and there are probably some navigation that had to take place in getting them to trust you and really kind of work hard for you, probably, right. I'm guessing.
Yeah. So I had a really great senior class. There was 6 of them, and culture-wise, there was already a good culture put in place here. That was one of the things that drew me to this job. I was in a place where we were winning a lot of games, and I was very happy. So I wasn't going to leave that for an opportunity that wouldn't be a good fit. And the culture here, like I said, was one of the things that really drew me to wanting to take this position. So I met with a couple of the seniors right when I took this job, and, they were instrumental in pretty much, right when the job came open, they were calling our recruits and saying, hey, our administration has our back, and you need to just be good. Everything will be fine. Yeah. We're very confident in, what they're going to do for us. And so they kind of kept the train on the tracks as far as that went before any hire was made, which was really awesome.
Yeah, that's valuable.
And so then when I got here, I met with a couple of them, like I said, and they pretty much were like, we've had a lot of good things happen here, and we're very thankful for those things, but whatever you want to mold this program into, we're on board. And
that's
it
impressive.
was,
it's a mature
absolutely
student athlete.
Absolutely. And it was kind of like one of those things, because you hear horror stories from other people, but it was just, I was extremely fortunate to have a group of people who were so willing to just say, hey, whatever you want to mold us into, we're good with that. We want to do that. And, we had a lot of conversations about, if we're all on the same boat, we all have the same, goal in mind, then it's going to be really hard to stop us. And they really bought in from day one. I'm a little different from what they were used to for the last 3 years, and what they and what they did for the 3 years before me wasn't wrong. It worked for them, but I'm just a little different, and they really they hit the ground running, and it was just they made me look really good because they bought in, and they pretty much said, everybody get on this boat and let's see what we can do. So I was really fortunate to have good people and really good leadership early.
Yeah.
And that was excellent for me.
Yeah, that's really impressive. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, and I've been through.
I'm sorry.
Hey,
hard life.
you don't have to apologize anymore. The tide has turned. But I was going to say, I've been through a lot of regime changes, and I know from a professional athlete perspective, not everyone is willing to buy in to new programs.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to do. So a lot of credit out to those.
A lot of credit to them, but also it's a testimony to you as well in valuing the relationship with the players as much as your philosophy. You know, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest differences in coaches, I think, who understand today's player, and I mean, you strike me as someone who does, and so.
Well, actually, I was kind of segueing into that because you retweeted something from Bob Shipley one time on Twitter, and he was talking about the difference between punishment and basically love, and you know how athletes respond better to knowing that their coach cares for them. So you know, I was going to basically share that same sentiment that Coach Stewart did there. That while a lot of credit goes to those seniors, I'm sure that when they sat down and they talked to you, they saw, you know, someone that was genuinely there to help them and take care of them. So I don't think anything like that happens just naturally.
Right.
There has to be a two-way trust there.
Well,
so it
I
sounds
think
like that's the way it went.
That's an important part of the culture that I want to have. Is, you know, I want an open line of communication between my athletes, and I want them to have ownership in what they do. You know, I ask for input from them on a lot of things. But one thing that any one of the kids that play for me, one thing that they will know is that I care about them.
Yeah.
And that's something that they can walk away from our program knowing that there's somebody who's always in their corner. And honestly, you know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you have to, that was kind of, you know, right when I got here, what I had to show them is, you know, I genuinely care about all of you more than whatever statistic you could put on a website for me. Okay. And because we kind of got that trust early, I was able to be very hard on them when it came to, you know, practice and stuff like that. And you have that level of trust, and you can push them, and they understand that whenever you're telling them, you have those frank conversations, like, this isn't good enough right now. Okay. I respect that.
You have to have those.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that's a hard thing for a lot of people to come into, you know, at the college level. They're not really told that a lot because most likely they were the best player on their team.
Right.
And they were always the person that, you know, needed the bat in their hand with the 2 outs and the game was on the line. Well, you come in to a college program, everybody's that person. And you're not always going to get playing time right away. So you have to be able to have those conversations in a way that, you know, they trust and understand that you want the best for them. And so the reason that you're saying this isn't because you don't like them, you know what I mean? It's ultimately so that you can get all 100% out of them.
Regardless
and
of what the role is in that
right,
team.
and you help them reach whatever they're able to.
I think that's gold information for the coaches that are listening.
No doubt.
You know, we think about mechanics. We think about how we're going to plan our practice. You know, one thing, and I would say most coaches would say, I care about my kids. But I think the big question is, do they know?
What's it look like?
What's it look
How?
like? Good, yeah.
Specifically how.
Yeah.
And write it down for yourself. You don't have to show it to anybody. Just if you say that, then tell yourself how that is true.
Right.
By answering specifically how and what does it look like. You know, speaking of the people who are listening, we find that we have a lot of people listening to our podcast in the short time that's been out public that have children who are playing youth sports and it's been a variety, hasn't it? I mean, we've had baseball, but we've also had softball, volleyball, football. Yeah. And we're receiving comments from these different folks and requests to talk about things. And of course, recruiting is one of the big ones, and we're going to get into that. But one of the big topics that we've been talking about is the issue of player development. And we actually spent about 6 episodes outlining our vision for particularly a baseball player development program that would replace the current structure of what is recreational ball or travel ball. And it's a long play. It's a long, but it would take a while to do. But we get excited about it, about thinking about it. And the reason why we get excited about it is because as we look at the landscape of youth baseball, particularly, we're talking about travel ball, and then you have recreation ball, which is a different animal, but we're seeing a greater emphasis placed on things that we don't think is helpful. For example, a greater emphasis placed on playing a lot of games because, one, that's what the kids want. I think it's also what the parents want. We also have talked about, we also kind of think it's what the coaches prefer because perhaps practice is hard. I mean, practice is coach's day. I mean, you got to know how to run a good practice, how to make it fun, how to make it competitive. And so it's just easier to make out a lineup and want to coach during games. And games are, if you're talking about fun, I mean, yeah, they are more fun than games. Or games are more fun than practice. But typically. Yeah, depending on what side of that I guess you're on. But one of the things that we'd be interested in hearing your perspective on is in the world of softball. We're curious to know, from a softball perspective, have you noticed any particular weaknesses, or I guess the way that you would notice this would be players coming into your programs, as not just here at OU, but as long as you've been a college coach. Have you noticed any particular weaknesses or deficiencies in your incoming freshmen, something that maybe is just universal across all athletes that maybe you feel like they should have developed, or you wish they would have developed more in their travel ball years or their high school years? Is there something that could be done better when they're in those development ages that would really help you as a college coach?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things, honestly. From deficiency wise, like you said, practice is hard. And a lot of the time, if we're not practicing a lot, what are we doing? We're probably going out and we're getting on a tee and doing something like that. Well, deficiency defensively is what I have seen. Wow. There's a huge emphasis on hitting right now, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love hitting. It's an exciting part of our game.
It's become a bigger part of the softball game, hasn't
absolutely.
it? I mean, you've seen a lot of thumpers.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, with the amount of emphasis that's been placed on hitting, the fact that, like you said, I mean, ultimately you can do it by yourself and practice it.
You get a lot of personal instruction. Right. Personal instructors have an easier time doing hitting probably than they do fielding, for example.
Right. But defense would be a huge deficiency that I've seen, at least. And I mean, even at the college level, you can tell there are some programs who, they can smash, but they can't make it past or into postseason or past postseason because they can't catch and throw. And, it's like, okay, I understand, like, yeah, if you hit 1 home run, it might give you 4 runs, but if you make 3 errors in an inning, it might give up 7. So, it's a balance, and that's something that that I have seen a deficiency in, as far as, just split-second decision making. They're not sure what to do, and they don't know, and so that's something, that for us, it's, we do a ton of defensive reps because you can't second guess a split second decision. That's the whole point, So being sure and taking a good amount of reps defensively, and it's a big surprise for a lot of people whenever they get to us. And I would say on the same, same kind of side of that, the injuries that you see because of, throwing and things like that. Yeah. You see more of that coming in, especially early, because they're not used to the volume.
Right.
They might have only been playing softball for the last, 4 or 5 years. And, I love multi-sport athletes. When kids say, well, okay, now I'm committed. Should I stop playing basketball? I'm like, no.
Oh, wow.
Play
Good.
basketball. Play all the sports.
Yes.
If you look at some of the best college football teams in America, the majority of them are multi-sport athletes.
Exactly.
That's what they look
Yep.
for, and there's a reason for that. They're out of the training room more often than the people who aren't, and they are just overall more athletic. And there's something to be said about that. I think that for whatever reason, it's, I don't know, probably 10 years ago, there was this kind of, I don't know if the word myth is the right word, but it was like, you should specialize.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And now you've gotten to college and you can only play one position. Mm-hmm. You're only good at doing one thing. Well, the person that's over here and good at 6 is going to pass you up really easily.
And I'll tell you another huge component of this, or huge variable in this, is I think they're mentally weaker when they specialize, if they're not competing in some way. I mean, that's where, if you're specializing, you better find a way to compete in the same way and have the pressure put on you in the same way that you would if you were in January at the free throw line with the game tied and no time left on the clock, and you get an opportunity to win the game for your team, and the crowd's going crazy. That to me is a girl who has to do that is probably going to be a little more relaxed in the box, in the batter's box.
Absolutely.
In the championship game than someone who was in the weight room or hitting balls off a tee or going to see a personal instructor during January.
Right. Not only that, but in most cases, in that scenario that you're talking about, those specialized athletes, if they would go play a different sport, they're playing a sport that they're weaker in. So they're behind the curve in that.
That's a good point.
They've got to focus more. They struggle more when they step back onto the field or the court of their specialized sport, it just comes more natural.
They're dealing with more failure. Yeah.
Well, and our sport is one of the only ones that fails as often as, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the thing is, whenever you're looking at other sports and the stat lines on those, like you don't see the amount of failure on those. And so it takes a special person to be able to play a bat and ball sport, honestly. You have to be okay with sitting on the bench after an at bat that was maybe good, and maybe even you square up a ball, you smash it, it goes right to someone. What can you do? You got to go sit down on the bench and cheer on everyone else.
That girl feels bad about lacing a line drive to left field, and the girl makes a diving catch, but the next one gets up and hits a little squibbler that makes it in the 5.5 hole, and she beats it out to first base, and and it looks great on her average.
I always say baseball or softball, those two games, they will humble you. At some point they're going to humble you. I was listening. Go ahead.
Were you transitioning there to a different point?
I wasn't. I was going to talk about some other things. But
I kind of want to go back to something that you said when you were talking about one of the deficiencies being defense, and particularly one of the deficiencies being having the instinct to make the correct play.
That's where I was going.
I wonder, and I want to ask you if you think this is true. I wonder if some of that has to do with the fact that they've never had to make that decision because they have coaches and people yelling out where to go.
Absolutely.
That they're running bases and they're being told to look at the third base coach before they do anything instead of making those instinctive athletic decisions on their own. It drives me crazy to see that.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, you go to any softball game or baseball game, I'm sure, and the coach is in the dugout saying, "All right, you got runner here. Make sure if you're in the outfield, or throw it here. If you're in the infield, go here. If you do this, do that." You know what I mean? And it's just, I mean, you're creating people who are relying on you in a something. You don't have time. You don't have time to scream at them for everything they're supposed to do. They need to know how to do
everything.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, I mean, there's no ownership in that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what you have to have ownership. You have to be able, as a player, to say that my fault. As a coach, you have to be able to say, "Hey, my fault," but there's no ownership in me telling you what to do every 5 seconds. You have to make those decisions on your own.
Yeah, I was really surprised, but really happy to hear you say that, because I think the argument some people would make is that the more games you play, the more apt you are to be able to make those instinctive decisions. But we're hearing right now that that's not necessarily the case. We're talking about students that are playing a lot of games.
There's a different reason why they can't make those decisions, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with how many games they're playing.
Exactly. And I think we're honestly, not to toot a horn, but we're making an argument for unstructured free play and the need for our kids to get out and to play, baseball and softball and different sports with their friends and figure those kinds of things out on their own, because they don't have anyone to rely on in those situations, so.
Yeah, we've talked about creating as part of the structure in a player development program, actually having some planned time of practices where, let's say if you have a 2-hour practice and you've got your youth teams all over the ballpark, your first hour might be you're instructing a skill, and you're drilling it out, and you're really helping them with some particular fundamental. And then the next hour, you say, okay, we're going to create 2 teams out of this group of kids, or however many teams you need to make to fill out the defensive field, and we're going to let you play, because kids just aren't going out and doing this on their own anymore. We're going to let you play. Parents, coaches, get over on the sidelines, and the only thing you're allowed to do is cheer. You can't coach them up at all. We got to make them make decisions. And so when they're running around the bases, they got to figure out the ball's in front of me. Yeah, I can make my own decision there, Or if they have a teammate go out and coach the bags or whatever on offense, but on defense, you got to make all those decisions yourself. There's so much that they could learn if they just weren't being so overcoached. I think.
No, I agree. There is incredible value in letting an athlete figure out on their own how to do things. Is it frustrating for them? Yeah, but you're preparing them.
Yeah.
The game's not built to make you feel warm and fuzzy. It's just that it's a game of failure.
Yeah.
So when you're figuring it out, sometimes you're going to make the wrong decision, and that's fine as long as you learn from it.
Right.
Yeah, I was listening to a Brian King podcast the other day, and he said that every play, he was talking about baseball, it's the mental strength coach, every play has bad and good. Everything you do during a play in a game has bad and good. It's just how you respond to that.
Right.
Even if the result's good, the process might have been bad.
Yeah.
Process could have been good. The result could have been bad. And there's a bunch of little pieces in between.
Yeah, that's good.
You fail a little bit in everything you do.
Coach, you worked at camp with Brian Kane, didn't you? Florida?
Yeah, at Florida State.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Love Brian Kane.
Coach, could you tell us where you focus the majority of your efforts in the recruiting process? Maybe give us an idea of the percentage, or what that you spend more time on between things like travel tournaments, showcases, on-campus prospect camps, high school games, or anything else that you might spend your time on from a recruiting perspective?
Yeah, I think the majority of our efforts are spent at tournaments. We are with the way that travel softball has just kind of really blown up. I'm able to go in a weekend and evaluate 500 athletes, and so it's more cost efficient, more time efficient, any of those things to go do that. While I'm at a tournament, if I identify an athlete that I like, I'm gonna invite them to a camp.
Your own
right,
camp.
mine, yeah. So, and I do that basically. Okay, I like what I've seen so far. Are you gonna fit into what our process is? You know what I mean? And that's there are kids that you have to say no to because you just don't fit our mold, and that's okay. Doesn't mean you're not a good player. It just means that you're not. This isn't gonna be a good fit for you or me.
Yeah.
So find you a place where you can have that. But that's where the prospect type camps. That's where you learn if they're gonna fit your mold. If they're gonna jive with your coaching style. I have a staff. All of us are right around the same age. We're 30 years old, and we're real laid back. Yeah.
30 years old.
We're a real laid back group. We laugh and we joke, but when we're in the lines, it's business.
Yeah.
And not every person fits every single mold. So it's
Sure.
just, that's kind of where you get to know them a little bit. So I would say that that's a very important part of the recruiting process for me. I'm not going to offer a kid, not unless it's a pitcher that strikes out 21 a game, without having them come,
Yeah.
come see me and
Especially
really
see the
kind of
campus
vibe.
too.
Right. Yeah.
It's got to be a school that they really want to go to as well.
Well, and that's the thing too is, a lot of, I tell every recruit that comes onto my campus is this has got to be a place where if the softball team was not here, if the coaching staff was not here, can you be happy?
Yeah.
Because anything can happen. I mean, you've seen medical DQs, whatever the reason is, and can you be happy here? Is this a place that you love?
Yeah. Those are the exact words that my son Brock had. We had him on 3 episodes ago, and that's, we asked him a similar question from the student athlete perspective, and he said he asked himself that same question. Yeah.
It's important, and when you have that, okay, you don't really get that grass is greener syndrome. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because and with the transfer portal coming going live this past fall, you kind of saw that in some places. Sure. And it didn't work out for everybody that went on that portal either.
It is not,
and there was people that it helped, but you got to find the right fit. And I think when we had gone into that early recruiting, we had been committing kids who are 14 years old, and 14-year-old,
it's an 8th grader, isn't it?
Yeah, 8th or 9th.
Yeah.
But my 14-year-old self would not have been able to decide what I wanted to do collegiately.
Yeah. But haven't they in the last 2 or 3 years adjusted that rule or changed the rule to where you're no longer allowed to
It's the last year.
commit? Right?
Yeah, it's only it actually changed September 1st of last year. Yeah.
Your first day at OU.
Yeah. So that went into effect, and honestly, it's a good thing because I don't think that somebody who's 14 years old needs to be making that kind of decision. Mm-hmm. I couldn't imagine, having college coaches call me when I'm 14, asking me to come on campus and then asking me to commit to something. And then ultimately, too, as a college coach, you're recruiting them longer than they're playing for you.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, what are we doing?
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's just, so it was good to kind of just like pump the brakes on that a little bit. You've seen it help a lot of people. It's giving us a little bit of extra time to evaluate. Yeah. Which has been good. But yeah, it's been a relatively new change. But I think in the long run, it's going to be really great. Yeah. Great for softball.
And so the change specifically is prior to last year, September 1 last year, you were allowed to offer scholarship, say, a spot on the team to a player as young as you wanted to.
Pretty much, yeah.
But you're no longer allowed to make that offer until when?
So right now, it's not even, so you can make an offer, after September 1 of their junior year.
Okay.
Prior to that, you cannot have any recruiting conversation.
Yeah.
So
that's basically the same as baseball.
Is it?
That is. So they just basically have said. That's odd that it was that way. It was different for softball. Maybe it's different for every sport. I don't know.
It is.
Okay.
And they've gone to a more universal type deal over the last little bit, but
yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's that definitely, you want to look into it depending on, because they have Olympic sports and then they have non-Olympic sports, and so the rules are different.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the NCAA, the NCAA compliance book is only like that thick. What, 6 inches thick or so? Mm-hmm. Right. So, well, as you're looking at these recruits, and you're seeing them play in a tournament, and you're starting to make some mental notes on a player or start a card on somebody or something. What are you looking for? What are some of the most important factors you're looking for in a young student athlete?
Athleticism, obviously. I look for kids who who can make athletic moves. You can watch some athletes play and you're like, it's getting it done, but is it not? It's not being done in a way that's very, I don't know the word, refined. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying everything needs to look like a cookie cutter, because I don't agree with that at all. I think we're all very different, and that's one of the best things about, our sport, is that you see on the same team a kid who's 5'1" and can run down the line, really fast, and then you see on that same team a kid who's 6'2" and just hits bombs, or her job is totally different. So it takes all kinds of kinds, but I'm looking for production.
Yeah.
That's a big one. My job isn't, I have to win, and
right.
that's probably the most understated thing that I've said today, but production is important, and then grit. I love watching kids who have just a little bit of just grit to them.
Kind of nose to them.
Yeah, and I feel like those kids, whenever it's like the going's getting rough, you look at them and they find ways. But that's a big thing for me is tough kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got to be tough. We talk about being mentally strong, and our practices are hard. They're built to be mentally draining.
Yeah.
And we talk every day. We have one of our groups, either outfield or infield. They'll come early and we rep them out for an hour, and it is just go. It's where we do a lot of our just softball type conditioning as well. And then once that's done, we'll bring the team, everybody's together, and then that's when I really challenge them mentally. So now they're exhausted.
Yeah.
But I don't care, because practice is starting.
Best time to get a mental challenge.
Right. Yeah. So, you have to be mentally tough to make it through what we're doing. And you have to be mentally tough to be held up to a very high standard.
Yeah.
So I like seeing kids who play for tough coaches, because I'm like, they can play for us.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
When you talk about kids that have an overall athleticism to them and getting things done in a number of different ways, possibly because they just are they're athletic. They've worked on their athleticism. I almost said they're naturally athletic. Yeah, people are naturally athletic, but it's also a skill. Athleticism is something that you can build as well. But I wonder if sometimes I see this in baseball as well. If when you see a kid play, it's hard to define sometimes the difference between a really athletic kid and a kid who is super skilled because they mechanically have done everything the right way, or they've had a personal instructor for everything that they do, and so they have that mechanically. Like you look at a kid and you're like, man, that swing is perfect, but then they get in the box and they can't hit a lick.
Yeah.
Right.
They can't compete in the batter's box. But man, they're cage rats. They hit cage bombs like crazy.
Right.
And I wonder if sometimes they can become overly mechanical, or I don't know, just over coached maybe.
Paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I've found a place for a kid. I was at a tournament and I saw this kid, and you could tell it was on her own. She'd delay steal from first to second. 2 pitches later, she'd delay steal from second to third, and she's just watching the pitcher, not paying attention. She was kind of pouting because she wasn't doing great. And those are the kids that I'm like, I want that kid on my team, because she's like, I'm going to take advantage of this, you know, and she's finding a way to get 60 feet closer. And that's, we talk about 60 feet all the time in our program, and how important 60 feet is to us. And, from a defensive standpoint, keeping them 60 feet further away, and from an offensive standpoint, stealing every 60 feet we can. So, stuff like that. And like for me, athleticism, that comes a little bit in that as well. Like you can tell this kid probably played, softball or baseball in her yard with her friends because, she's like just making these, she's making these decisions on her own, and she's competitive, and she's trying to find a way to get a run across. And
Right.
I mean, as somebody who needs more runs, and I mean, I'll take all the runs I can get,
runs.
right?
Right.
I appreciate that.
Right.
So
You need base runners and you need runs.
I think you have to supplement different types of approaches at different times. And I'm aware of that because I've done working with my kids. I've noticed at times trying to correct one issue, they become a little bit more, I'd say robotic.
Yeah, robotic's a good word for that.
And, there's been times where I've just said, you know what, just forget everything that we've been talking about. I just want you to, swing hard here, or, just,
Right.
just focus on something else. And because I've noticed that instead of taking a step forward, they're actually taking a step back.
Yeah.
So, I think overcoaching is definitely a thing. So, for sure.
Related to, I think, athleticism is how important is strength training and strength and agility training to your program now, and then how soon do you think, when should girls begin doing it?
I think that is different for every female. The weight room is something that should enhance your game, and I think that a long time ago that was how much weight can we put on this person, and how much bigger can we get. I don't necessarily look for bigger, I look for faster. So some of the best hitters that I've seen haven't been the biggest kid. They've had the fastest hands, so they were able to let the ball travel deeper, make good decisions, and they were explosive. That's a good word, yeah. And so for me, that's what I look for. Obviously, a lot of what we do is it's in our core. And so we do a bunch of core workouts, all of our positions, pitchers, everybody. I mean, that's important, and how we can get those muscles to, because we're a short burst energy sport. It's not like we're running back and forth constantly. It's called a leisure sport, and that's what it is. Yeah. And even as a pitcher who has the ball every single time, the pitching motion lasts, 0.1 something seconds, okay? So by the time a 7-inning game happens, they've really only been at work for about 4 minutes. And when you think about it like that, you're like, okay, so how do I get those short burst energy, number one, to stay consistent for 7 innings, right? And then how do we train those muscles to fire like that? So that's what we work on is, a lot of the short burst energy, explosive type movements. We've really gone away. I think the majority of people in our sport have gone away from long distance and things like that. So we found that it was actually slowing our athletes down, and it was not helpful. So, I mean, I would say if you could do, some of the best stuff you can do is just short burst sprints, like a 5-yard sprint, and 100%, you're going 100% for 5 yards, that kind of stuff, because that is ultimately what we're doing.
Yeah, it's very functional,
right,
to the game. Yeah,
exactly. And as far as when to start, I think it depends on because puberty is a very funny thing. So
yeah, it is.
And you don't want to hurt.
Right.
I think it's just kind of depends on who it is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't start them very early, though, not with any kind of weight.
Not with weights.
Yeah, but they can run.
Things,
they can do body weight. They can do that pretty much from whenever they can start walking.
Right, and we've talked about before that we think that that's something that the kids in this day are missing most, because they
just the natural exercise.
Yeah, they don't get out. They're not playing tag with their friends and having water gun fights across the neighborhood and things like that. And so they're not running and they're not jumping and doing those different things. I have a 9-year-old son, Jeremiah, and he had a friend over during the summer. I've been doing some CrossFit training. I haven't in a month or so, but
hardcore.
I'm gonna get back to it though. But I was I was feeling good about myself, and I was like, I'm getting in shape. I feel good. And we were out playing wiffle ball, and it was late. and it was dark and the grass was wet, and this is the house that I grew up in, the yard that I grew up in. I played 1,000 wiffle ball games in this yard, and I came running around third base and went to stop and just slipped and fell on my butt, and it hurt so bad. But as I was in the air, I think I began to think, as I was floating, that I'm not. I feel like I'm in better shape, but I must not be in very functional shape. You know what I mean? Because I wasn't able to stop.
Yeah.
I haven't been doing any workouts that prepared me to stop on this wet grass, which was basically a core strength movement. But it's important. It's important to get out and do those things for our kids. And a lot of times they don't have the opportunity to do it. So if we don't have to weight train them.
Right.
But, body weight training and things like that, very good.
I mean, sometimes literally our conditioning would be sharks and minnows. Like, you're a shark, you're a shark, you're a shark. All right, go. And so they're like moving around, but it's short burst energy because I'm a shark, I'm going to run after you. Okay, now I'm a shark, now I'm going to run after you.
This is in your college practice.
Yeah.
Okay. So playing a game of wiffle ball in your 10U practice doesn't sound so bad, does it? They're playing tag up here in their college
Right,
practice.
Exactly.
So, it's fun.
It's good stuff.
It's helpful. Yeah.
You don't even realize that you're doing something that's functional to your sport. Plus, it's competitive.
Right.
I tell every single one of my kids. Right. I tell every single one of my kids I'm competitive, like to a fault. If you challenge me to a spitting contest, I'm gonna beat you. I don't care if you're the fastest runner on our team. I'll challenge you to a race, and I'll find a way to win. If that means that you get tripped or what, I don't care.
That's right.
But you're gonna have to figure out how to beat me. And so tag is like, that doesn't sound like very whatever, but it's functional. It is competitive.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, honestly,
you're making quick cuts.
It's fun.
Yeah.
And before the game, right? At least in a softball and baseball setting, the umpire says, "Play ball, not work ball."
Yeah.
And so we have to remember that sometimes. This is this is a game that brings joy to. I mean, ultimately, you hope that's why they're there. You know what I mean? So how can we cultivate that in different ways? And maybe it's not doing a bat and ball specific thing, but we can cultivate that joy doing other things. Something simple like playing tag.
Yeah, I can see how you'd have to be intentional about that in a college atmosphere because it is a lot of work. And the older you get, that the more the game becomes important to you to win, and in order to be a winner in it, you have to work, and so you've got to be intentional about keeping it fun, keeping it a game.
Right.
Yeah, I think that from a I'll just say from a tournament perspective or a number of games perspective, I think that's a good argument point, because the more games a kid plays, the less of a privilege it seems to be. Or like you said, we talked about, Coach, the more fulfilled they become of playing those games. Yeah. So it's not as important. So we need to use our practices and we need to use our approach to the game to make these games important to kids, so that they do. It's a fun game. I would say, based on listening to the description of your practices, we asked your players what they enjoyed, or when they have their most joy, they're probably going to say they're in the games they're having a lot of joy. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. Cool. Well, had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did.
We got to ask one last thing though. To every guest that comes, we have to ask this question.
I think I agree with you.
So
I'll ask it.
All right, you got it. Coach,
what is your favorite memory from your days of playing youth sports?
A favorite memory, I guess. We're not gonna make you nail one.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, going back to like high school, I had a really great experience. Like I said, in high school, I had a really competitive high school team. The majority of us all played travel softball, and the majority of us went and played college softball. So that was a fun experience, and that was honestly the first time that you get to play for something. You know what I mean? So you play travel ball, and you're going out and you're trying to get the recruiting thing done, and you play for your school, and it's the first time that you play representing something that's way bigger than that. You know what I mean? And I think that was a big thing for me whenever I kind of got into that. I would say, collegiately, going to the World Series. I mean, that's a memory I'll never forget, and it's something that I'm extremely proud of. And yeah, I mean, the best things in the world, at least for me, like athletics, are the connections and the people that I'm still in touch with. I'm still I grew my network by being in athletics, and I touch different parts of the United States because of that, and different parts of the world even. And that's just really cool to me. How I've been able to do that.
Yeah. Back to relationships. We started with relationships and finished with it. That's good stuff. That's what one of the things that sports does is it helps you build current relationships and it helps you make new ones. Man, it's going to be really good for us to share this episode with the people who are listening, because one, we need the diversity of other sports and especially men's sports, women's sports, and we already have that on our listenership, and you have just given us a wealth of information to be able to share with people. But is there anything that maybe we didn't talk about that you'd like to conclude with, or anything that you would like to add?
I think some advice to parents, and remember that their coach is there to criticize them.
Yes.
That's what you're putting them on a team to do, and ultimately most of the time those coaches are not, especially at the youth level, they're not being paid, they're volunteering their time. So when you speak to your athlete about their coaches, remember, number one, this is not their full-time job most of the time, okay? Speak about them in kindness, and even if maybe you don't agree with everything that they do, your first job whenever they get into a car after the game is, I really enjoyed watching you play today. And some of the best memories are in the car on the way home with your parents after these games, and not everybody gets that, and that I genuinely hate that when I hear that. And so I always encourage your first statement to your kids is, I really enjoyed watching you play today. It just means a lot, and they already know what they did wrong.
Sure.
They had a coach on their field telling them everything they did wrong.
Yeah.
They don't need to go over it over and over again, and most kids, especially the really competitive ones, they're already beating themselves up for it. They're mad. They want to be better. They want to be better. And so just being able to get in the car and hear that is nice.
Definitely. That's great stuff, Coach. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah.